Gilmore is on an expiring contract with the New England Patriots, begging the question, what is next, both for the player and for the franchise? Mariah, Janos, and Evan Lazar here. Evan, if Stephon Gilmore is traded this offseason, what exactly makes sense? What would a good return look like for him, an appropriate transaction?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because he only has 1 year left on his contract. He's going to be 31. He's going to want a new deal, maybe even before the next season. And I think that this is a storyline that sort of got swept under the rug by all the quarterback stuff and all the Brady stuff. But remember, there was a lot of turmoil surrounding Stephon Gilmore last season. He had to get a pay bump to come back to training camp. Then he has put his house on the market for sale, but right before the NFL trade deadline. And it sort of felt like he was getting dealt before the NFL trade deadline. It didn't end up happening, but you do have to get something good in return for your best player. He's the Patriots' best player on the roster currently, and you have to get something good for him. I think that there's two interesting avenues the Patriots could take about this. They could try to get the best possible pick that they could, which I think is probably a second rounder, hopefully something in the top 50, or they could try to package Stephon Gilmore in a more aggressive, big picture type of move where you trade 15 and Stephon Gilmore to Dallas for the 10th pick and you draft a quarterback, for example, or you trade Stephon Gilmore in a pick for a stud wide receiver, an already proven NFL wideout. Something like that could be interesting, and there's a lot more player-for-player trades going on in the NFL these days than, let's say, 10 years ago. So I think that that's the best thing that they could do with him, is using him as a trade chip within the framework of a bigger deal instead of just shipping him out for the 60th pick in the draft, right? Because what really are you going to get out of that? Maybe doing something a little bit more outside the box, kind of NBA style, going player for player. That might be something that would be really intriguing for the Patriots, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if they do end up trading Stephon Gilmore, we saw even this season when he was injured, J.C. Jackson slid into that number one cornerback spot. What kind of impact would this have on him? Would he be the de facto number one, or is there someone else that we should be keeping in mind and he would still be placed in that secondary role of cornerback?
It's an interesting problem to have because J.C. Jackson's a restricted free agent this year. The Patriots are probably going to place a first-round tender. I doubt that they will lose J.C. Jackson in any sort of free agency. But last year when Stephon Gilmore was out of the lineup, J.C. Jackson gave up over 9 yards per target. When Stephon Gilmore was in the lineup, it was under 3 yards per target. So going up against those number one guys, Stephon Diggs, even a guy like Brashad Perryman, gave J.C. Jackson some problems. And I think that you do have some hesitancy and just handing that number one CB spot over to a guy that every single dress rehearsal that he had last year, he had some ups and downs. So he reminds me a lot of the situation that they had with Malcolm Butler. Now, Malcolm Butler ended in a much different way than what J.C. Jackson's season ended a year ago, but giving him something that's a reasonable contract, I think, is what the Patriots are going to try to do this offseason, to sign J.C. Jackson to an extension that's a comfortable number that they can still go out and use an asset, whether it's a first-round pick or signing another free agent cornerback, somewhere around $9-10 million a year. J.C. Jackson's representatives probably aren't going to want to take that. They're probably going to want to wait until he hits unrestricted free agency so he can maximize his value. But if Stephon Gilmore gets traded and J.C. Jackson is put into that number one spot, then his value could potentially go down as easily as it could go up if he doesn't play well and doesn't play up to snuff. So taking that guaranteed money right away is something that I think J.C. Jackson should take very seriously.
Yeah, for sure. Now, if Stephon Gilmore does walk, would taking a cornerback in the first round, using that 15th overall pick on a cornerback, would that make sense to you?
This is something that I think every single time I throw it out there drives Patriots fans absolutely nuts. Like, we really need another corner in the first round. And Daniel Jeremiah, NFL Network, he mocked J.C. Horn, from South Carolina, ironically, Stephon Gilmore's alma mater, to come to the Patriots to replace Stephon Gilmore. And Horn is one of those aggressive man coverage press corners, really fluid in coverage, can play man-to-man, can play a little bit zone. He's their Patriot type of corner. They also have Patrick Surtain in the draft. He's a very Patriot-like corner from Alabama, similarly very smooth in his technique. He's the son of Patrick Surtain, Senior, who has played in the NFL for 11 seasons, so some pedigree there and some lineage. There are a couple of really good first-round cornerbacks, Caleb Farley from Virginia Tech being the last one. Those three are very Patriot-like corners that could come in here and make a really big impact. And I think we do have to consider it a possibility, especially if the Patriots go out and they address their offensive needs in free agency. They go and they sign a wide receiver and they take care of quarterback. Then you can start to look to some of those secondary needs in the first round and maybe get the best player available with somebody like Horn or Patrick Surtain falling to you at 15. That's probably going to be one of the best players left on your board. So best player available in the draft, you address the needs elsewhere. Then I can talk myself into it. If we still are going into the draft weekend and Jacoby Myers is the best receiver on the team, and that's a different story, taking a corner in the first round. But if we're already past that point, then maybe it does make some sense. And the last point I'll make, there is a lot of value with having that position, the cornerback position, on a cost-controlled rookie contract, because guys like Stephon Gilmore get paid. Right? You know, guys like Marshawn Lattimore, guys like, you know, Jalen Ramsey, they either get paid by their team or they get traded and then they get paid. You know, those guys don't grow on trees. They don't come available in the free agent market very often. And when they do, they almost always set records with their deals. So to have somebody that is under contract for 4+ years with a 5th-year option, very cost controlled, very cost effective, is a valuable asset to have to a football team. Would you see,
say, in the event that they do take a cornerback in the first round, do you see that pairing with J.C. Jackson as a better option than maybe, like you said, taking an offensive weapon in the first round instead and maybe trying to get a more veteran cornerback in that situation?
I love the option of making sure you take care of free agent wide receivers, trade market for pass catchers. I think that the days we've seen them try to go through the draft with skill players, and it hasn't worked out very well for them outside of a few exceptions. Deion Branch, Rob Gronkowski, you know, those are really the exceptions to the rule, whereas N'Keal Harry and Aaron Dobson and Sony Michel and all these guys have kind of become more of what's the norm here in New England. So getting players through the veteran market, whether it's trade or free agency, and acquiring those players that are guys that are proven NFL commodities that you can project to the NFL game a little bit easier, project into your offense a little bit easier because they've been at the pro level. I think that that's a much better way to go. Whereas with corners, I know they've had a bunch of busts in the second round, but I really trust Bill Belichick with defensive players in the draft. For the most part, I think that he does a really good job, especially in the first round, of getting guys that can play. And I would be much more inclined to feel good about it if they drafted Patrick Surtain in the first round versus if they took a chance on a wide receiver. I would immediately say to myself, you know, look, Jalen Waddle's a great player, but he just got drafted by the Patriots, so it's probably not going to work out. Whereas with a guy like Surtain, I'm going to feel a lot better about their evaluation of a corner.
All right, well, I guess we're just going to have to wait and see. For all of our Patriots coverage, head to clnsmedia.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel over at Patriots Press Pass.